Number 10. Acoustic Kitty. We all know cats are ungrateful roommates that sleep 18 hours a day and judge you for eating cereal at midnight. But in the 1960s, the CIA looked at a cat and thought, this is the perfect spy. This isn't a joke. This is your tax dollars at work. The plan was called Acoustic Kitty. The idea was to surgically implant a microphone into a cat's ear, run a wire down its spine, and hide a battery in its chest. Then, they would release the cat near Soviet agents sitting on park benches to eavesdrop on their conversations. Think of it like a walking, purring iPhone that doesn't need to be charged every 4 hours. The CIA spent 5 years and nearly $20 million developing this. That is enough money to buy a private island, but instead, they spent it creating a cyborg tabby. The scientists actually succeeded in the surgery. The cat was wired for sound. They took it out for its first field test. A van pulled up to a park. They opened the door and released the ultimate secret weapon. And immediately, the cat walked into the street and was run over by a taxi. It didn't last 5 minutes. The project was scrapped because, apparently, cats don't like following government orders. It turns out, trying to control a cat is like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. If you own a cat, you could have told the government this for free and saved them $20 million. Number 9. The Great Seal Bug. If you have ever been paranoid that your Alexa is listening to you, wait until you hear about the Russians. In 1945, a group of Soviet schoolchildren presented a gift to the U.S. ambassador in Moscow. It was a beautiful, hand-carved wooden replica of the Great Seal of the United States. It was huge. It looked impressive. The ambassador loved it. He loved it so much he hung it on the wall of his private study, right behind his desk. It hung there for 7 years. Every time the ambassador discussed top-secret strategy, that wooden seal was right there, listening. Here is the twist. There were no batteries inside. There were no wires. If the Americans had swept the room for bugs, they would have found nothing. The device inside, known as the Thing, used a technology so advanced for its time it basically looked like magic. It's like a guitar string that only vibrates when you shine a specific flashlight on it. The Soviets would park a van down the street and blast radio waves at the ambassador's office. These waves would activate a tiny membrane inside the seal, which would vibrate with the ambassador's voice and bounce the audio back to the van. It was the ultimate passive-aggressive weapon. We only found it by accident when a British radio operator tuned into the wrong frequency and heard the American ambassador complaining about his lunch. So, check your wall decorations. You never know who is listening. Number 8. Project Pigeon. During World War II, guidance systems for missiles were terrible. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have microchips. But we did have pigeons. Famous psychologist B.F. Skinner convinced the U.S. military that he could train pigeons to guide bombs. The concept is simpler than it sounds. You take a missile. You put 3 pigeons inside the nose cone. Each pigeon has a little screen in front of it showing the ground below. When the pigeon sees the target, like a ship, it pecks at the screen. The pecking moves the fins of the missile and steers it toward the target. Skinner trained these birds by giving them seeds every time they pecked the right spot. It's basically playing Candy Crush, except when you win, a battleship explodes. And the crazy part? It worked. The pigeons were incredibly accurate. They didn't get distracted. They didn't get motion sickness. They were the most focused pilots in the Air Force. But the military just could not get past the optics. Imagine a general trying to explain to the president that the future of American air superiority relies on a bird that eats garbage and poops on statues. They canceled the project because no one took it seriously. It's a shame, really. Pigeons have great eyesight and they work for minimum wage. It was the ultimate budget-friendly weapon system, hiding inside a bird coop. Number 7. The CIA heart attack gun. If you think the government needs a massive explosion to take someone out, you are watching too many Michael Bay movies. Sometimes they just need you to have a really bad day. In 1975, during the Church Committee hearings, the CIA revealed a weapon that looks like a standard Colt 45 pistol. But this gun didn't fire bullets. It fired a tiny dart made of frozen water and shellfish toxin. The dart was about the width of a human hair. When fired, it could penetrate clothing and enter the skin. But because it was so thin, you wouldn't even feel it. It would feel like a mosquito bite. You would slap your neck, look at your hand, see nothing, and go about your day. But inside your body, the frozen dart would melt. The toxin would enter your bloodstream. Within minutes, you would suffer a massive heart attack and die. When the coroner performed the autopsy, they would find absolutely nothing. No bullet. No poison residue. Just a natural heart attack. It was the perfect crime in a handheld package. The only evidence left behind was a tiny red dot on the skin, which is easily overlooked. So if you are walking down the street and feel a sudden pinch on your leg, Maybe you just got bit by a bug. Or maybe you just became a cold case file. The scariest part is that we know they had this gun 50 years ago. Imagine what they have now. Number 6. The World War I Fake Trees. World War I was a nightmare of mud, trenches, and stalemate. If you poked your head up to look around, a sniper would take it off. So, how do you spy on the enemy? You become a tree. The British and French engineers developed secret observation posts disguised as dead trees. But they couldn't just plant a fake tree in the middle of a field. The Germans would notice a new tree suddenly appearing, where there wasn't one yesterday. So the engineers had to be sneaky. They would find a real dead tree in no man's land that had been blasted by artillery. They would photograph it, measure it, and sketch every single branch. Then, back in a workshop behind the lines, they would build an exact replica. But the replica was hollow and lined with bulletproof steel. Here comes the dangerous part. Under the cover of total darkness, while artillery shells were flying overhead, a team would crawl out into the mud. They would cut down the real tree and drag it away. Then, they would drop the fake steel tree into the exact same hole. When the sun came up, the Germans saw the same dead tree they had been looking at for months. But inside that tree, a soldier was sitting on a tiny wooden stool, climbing up a ladder, and looking through peepholes hidden in the bark. These guys would sit in a metal tube for 18 hours a day, surrounded by rotting corpses and mustard gas, just watching. It gives a whole new meaning to hugging a tree. Number 5. The Boeing Wonderland. During World War II, the Boeing factory in Seattle was churning out B-17 bombers. This factory was crucial to the war effort. The military was terrified that Japanese bombers would fly over the West Coast and blow it up. So, the Army Corps of Engineers decided to hide the factory. But you can't just throw a tarp over a massive industrial plant. Instead, they built an entire fake town on the roof. From the air, it looked like a boring, sleepy American suburb. There were streets, sidewalks, trees, fences, and houses. It covered 26 acres. That is roughly the size of 20 football fields. But if you walked around this town, you would realize something was wrong. The houses were made of chicken wire and canvas. The trees were painted feathers. The cars were just flat pieces of wood. The height of the houses was only 4 feet tall. It was a town built for hobbits. Beneath this fake plywood neighborhood, thousands of workers were building massive death machines. They even hired actors to walk around on the roof during the day, pretending to walk their dogs or hang laundry, just in case a spy plane flew over. Imagine that job interview. Yes, we need you to pretend to live in a fake house on top of a bomb factory so we don't get blown up. It was the ultimate camouflage. The best place to hide a weapon of war is underneath a white picket fence. Number 4. The New York City Subway Bio-Test. Next time you're on the subway and someone sneezes on you, don't just worry about the flu. Worry about the government. In 1966, the U.S. Army wanted to know how easily a biological weapon could spread through a city. They needed a test subject. They chose the New York City subway system. Special operations scientists packed light bulbs full of a bacteria called Bacillus globigii. They dressed up as regular commuters, walked into the stations, and threw the light bulbs onto the tracks just as the trains were pulling in. The bulbs shattered. The train's whooshing air picked up the bacteria cloud and carried it through the tunnels. The scientists then rode the trains using sensors to see how far the bacteria spread. The results were terrifying. Within 20 minutes, the bacteria had spread through the entire system. It was on the seats, on the handrails, and in the lungs of thousands of people. The Army report concluded that if this had been a real lethal weapon, like anthrax or smallpox, over 1 million people would have died in the first week. And nobody knew. The commuters just thought the air was a little dusty that day. The government claimed the bacteria was harmless. And generally, it is. But if you had a weak immune system, tough luck. You were a lab rat in the world's biggest, dirtiest experiment. It really makes you want to wash your hands, doesn't it? Number 3. The bat bomb. We are back to animals, and this time, it is even crazier than the cat. After Pearl Harbor, America was angry. A dentist named Lytle S. Adams wrote a letter to the White House. He said, "I have been to the Carlsbad Caverns. I have seen millions of bats. Bats are dark and scary. Let's strap bombs to them." Most letters like this go straight into the trash. But this dentist was friends with the First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. So, the project got approved. The plan was to catch thousands of Mexican free-tailed bats. These bats are strong. They can carry a payload equal to their own body weight. The engineers designed tiny napalm canisters with little timers on them and glued them to the bats' chests. The idea was to drop a canister filled with hibernating bats over a Japanese city at dawn. The canister would open, the bats would wake up, and they would instinctively fly into the dark attics of the traditional wood and paper houses. Then, The timers would tick down. Boom. Thousands of houses would catch fire at the exact same time. It would be an inferno that fire trucks couldn't stop. They actually tested this, and it worked too well. During a test run at an Air Force base in New Mexico, a few armed bats escaped. They flew under the fuel tanks and into the general's car. They burned the entire airbase to the ground. The project proved that bats are effective arsonists. It was eventually canceled because the atomic bomb was almost ready. And honestly, the atomic bomb was less complicated than gluing napalm to a flying rodent. Number 2. The Ghost Army. In war, being strong is good, but being a liar is better. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, known as the Ghost Army, was a unit of artists, designers, and sound engineers recruited from art schools in New York and Philadelphia. Their job wasn't to fight. Their job was to pretend to fight. They arrived in Europe in 1944 with a very strange inventory. They didn't have heavy tanks. They had inflatable rubber tanks. They had fake jeeps made of wood. They had fake airplanes made of canvas. 4 guys could pick up a 40-ton Sherman tank and walk away with it. But the visual trick wasn't enough. They had massive speakers mounted on half-tracks. These speakers could blast the sound of an armored column moving from 10 miles away. They mixed audio of engines, squeaky treads, and soldiers shouting. They would set up these inflatable tanks in a field, blast the sound effects, and send out fake radio messages. The Germans would hear the noise, see the tanks from their spotter planes, and panic. Oh no, the Americans are attacking the left flank. The Germans would move all their troops to the left. Then, the real American army would attack the right flank, where there was nobody left to defend. The Ghost Army is estimated to have saved over 30,000 American lives, and they did it with balloons and speakers. It was the greatest magic trick in military history. Number 1. Project Iceworm. This is the ultimate Cold War secret lair. It sounds like something straight out of The Empire Strikes Back. In 1959, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers went to Greenland. They told the Danish government they were building a research camp to study the ice. That was a lie. They were actually building a nuclear launch site inside the glaciers. They dug miles of tunnels underneath the ice sheet. They built a fully functioning city powered by a portable nuclear reactor. It had a hospital, a movie theater, a church, and living quarters for 200 soldiers. The plan was called Project Iceworm. The goal was to store 600 nuclear missiles in these ice tunnels. From Greenland, these missiles could strike almost any target in the Soviet Union. It was the perfect hiding spot. Who looks for a nuclear silo inside an iceberg? But there was one problem the brilliant engineers forgot about: ice moves. Glaciers are essentially slow-moving rivers. As the years went by, the ice sheet started to shift and warp. The tunnels began to crush. The nuclear reactor room started to crack. The walls were closing in on the soldiers. In 1967, they had to abandon the base. They dragged the nuclear reactor out, but they left almost everything else behind. Thousands of gallons of sewage, radioactive coolant, and diesel fuel were left buried in the ice. For decades, it was safe, frozen deep below the surface. But now, because of climate change, the ice is melting. Scientists predict that the toxic remains of Project Iceworm could be exposed to the open air within the next 75 years. It's the secret weapon that is literally coming back to haunt us. So there you have it. The government has hidden weapons in cats, bats, subways, and icebergs. If that doesn't make you want to go live in a cabin in the woods, I don't know what will. But check the cabin for microphones first. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you at the next countdown.